The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
My baby dolls, we are back again, another episode of Genesis. As always, I'm your host, Ian Kahanowitz, and today we got a great show coming in for you. I mean, this is stellar stuff. We're going to learn about the minor leagues. We're going to learn about his family in the major leagues. We're going to learn about 3 generations of Campanises. And we got Jim Campanis Jr. on the show today with his wonderful book, Born into Baseball, Laughter and Heartbreak at the Edge of the Show. And we're going to get to Jim. We'll get to the book in about 2 minutes. And, of course, you are listening to the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network with the Zigzag Man, Ralph Tycho. And, you know, there's a lot of shows that are going on, folks. A lot of the shows coming up there. Doug Gladstone, guys lobbying for the players who were omitted from the 1980 collective bargaining agreement. They don't get a pension. They don't get health benefits. So he's getting a show every week with some of the former players who's in their 60s and 70s and are hurting financially. We're going to be talking with Doug. I'm going to be on his show a few times. Of course, he was on my show. And, of course, when you talk about the Players Association, especially I'm writing my second book on the collusion cases in the 1980s, and we'll ask Jim if he heard anything that his grandfather might have heard of during that time to shut down free agency. We talk about Bob Boone. He was on the Players Reps, and a lot of my chapters he's in. And, of course, Jim hung out with Brett Boone, who's been on this show twice. We'll get a little inside story there. We'll get a little inside story on the USC and, you know, World USA team and seeing how he was on the team back in the 80s. We'll have a good time on the show today. And if you don't know who catcher Jim Campanis, and you know I love catchers because they're the ones that are really the field generals on the baseball diamond. I always say Yogi Berra, Roy Campanella, Johnny Bench, Carlton Fisk, Thurman Munson. I mean, all these guys, they run the infield. They are the ones who call the pitches. Sometimes it's not from the managers, but they are the toughest. And, of course, back then, you could block the plate, so you always saw them getting bounced around. Today, I don't know what's with these kooky rules. We'll ask Jim about it, but then you can't block the plate and all this other BS. I mean, you can't remember baseball without the 70, All-Star game when Pete Rose smashed into Fosse at their plate. I mean, that's iconic. So we'll ask Jim about catching. We're going to ask him about the food in the minors in Seattle and Anaheim and growing up and having Ken Griffey as a roommate. And I got such a great show. I mean, I'm even excited to start it right now, which we're going to do. So, Jim, he was on the USA Junior team in 85. Now, this is what I like about stats. I'm not much of a stats guy, but he tied a school record with 92 RBIs in 1988 and played on Team USA in 88, but he wasn't on the roster for either the 88 Olympics or the World Cup. We'll get to that. He had 23 home runs at USC, which was second to Big Mac McGuire through 1988. He was signed as the 3rd-round pick in the 88 amateur draft. We'll ask him about the draft by the Seattle Mariners and scout Ken Halp, but never was able to quite get that edge into the majors. And we're going to have a great time talking about it because I love minor league ball. I mean, Pawtucket's like 2 minutes away from me here, the Pawtucket Red Sox. Without any further ado, welcome to the show, Jimmy.
Thank you very much, Ian. Looking forward to it.
You were born into baseball. I don't even have to ask for a rhetorical question. But, you read this book. Grandfather was in baseball in the 40s. Your father played when I was a little boy. When were you born? Late 60s, 66, 67?
Yeah, I'm 50, so I'll be 51 later this year. So I was born in 67, and and my dad was a Dodger at that time. And
growing up, I mean, your father was a Dodger. Later, your grandfather would be GM of the Dodgers. And now let me ask you something. You were pretty much born. I'm not even going to ask you when and what. I mean, you were born with a bat in your mouth and a glove in your hand. When did you realize that baseball was your professional future?
Well, I never didn't think it was. So, I wrote this in my book, when the kindergarten teacher, asked everyone in the class what they wanted to be, the kids like, oh, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a soldier, I want to be a, policeman. baseman or whatever. Baseball player, And, they asked the same question in junior high, same answer. They asked the same question, my high school counselor, what do you want to do, besides, sports? And I said, what are you talking about besides, baseball? I'm going to be a pro baseball player. And even at USC, we had like an exit, interview with a counselor who, supposed to help us guide us, part of the one of the things the school provides. And I had an argument with her because she's like, no, you need a backup plan. I said, okay, here's my backup plan. I'll coach. How's that? Is that a good enough backup plan for you? Now can I leave? And I was getting kind of defensive because, at that point, people look at you like, dude, come on, you know what the odds are. And I ended up being, according to the numbers, I'm like 1 out of 6 million players to get as high as I got. I did. Contractually, I was in the major leagues because I was on the 40-man, and they had called me up, but I had an injury. I was in Double-A, and they said, okay, you're going to get called up after this game, and our season will be ending, and you'll go to finish up in September in Seattle. And third pitch of the game, a guy, Willie Green from the Reds, he tipped the ball off my wrist, and a big snap. And I stayed in the game. I played the whole game. I got a base hit with a broken wrist. Didn't know it until they forced me to take an X-ray. And I'm like, look, it doesn't even hurt. Just get me that plane ticket. I'll go to Seattle and it'll be fine, And they're, no, dude, no, sorry. So I, as a player, I was so, I'm in my mind, committed to this that I'll make it next year, Well, the next year, guy ran me over and separated my shoulder, and I'll make it the next year and blew my knee out. So I just had a string of 3 years during the most critical years of your baseball career. I had 3 basically season-ending injuries that, there was nothing I could have done to prevent them. They all happened, very violently. And, one of them was a guy running me over at home plate, Joe Randa, former Royals player, who's like a bowling ball. When he hit me, and I was a quarterback in high school, and I even went to USC as a quarterback, and I never got hit that hard, except by Joe Randa in a baseball game, So anyway, I can look back and I can say, well, most likely I overachieved. I just think it was because I was able to learn so much from being a kid in the clubhouse about the mental part of the game and a lot of the mechanical and technical things in the swing. And so now that I think that's what makes me a really good coach, batting instructor. I'm doing it, on the weekends. I have a bunch of elite players, maybe 30 guys. I'm not saying I got these guys scholarships, but I helped them. I helped a number of kids last year in 2017. It was over $1 million worth of scholarships for baseball. And I just love helping players, continue to go to the next level, and they have dreams just like I did, and I feel like I'm still 18 when I'm in the cage with these young guys, and I'm talking about big time schools, Stanford and Columbia, and we have a bunch of kids, got a kid in Washington right now, and it's so much fun for me to sort of pass on this knowledge that I believe, it's very valuable to these kids, and it's kind of also been a really interesting and fun thing for me. And it's a book that I'm also going to be putting together with our publisher, a hitting book down the road here. And so anyway, it's just funny how baseball has been there before I can remember, and it's still there, every day. And so unfortunately, we're in the worst part of the year right now. There's no sports hardly for me to watch, but we got a couple of weeks, I guess, like a week now until the pitchers and catchers report. So I'll feel a little bit better in about a week.
Now, what's funny when I mentioned 2 things, because I love this. The good thing about these things, it's never choreographed. There's no script I read. You mentioned 2 things here that are jogging my memories. Number 1 is the slowest season here before spring training, is coming up. My thing is, I'm writing a book now on collusion, like I mentioned in the beginning of the show, and believe me, I went into the history of the Major League Baseball players, and I got about 450 pages written. Now I'm up to the drug trials in the early 80s. This winter, with the low amount of free agent signing and stuff like that, they're screaming about collusion amongst the owners again, that they're trying to keep salaries down by not signing. What's your feeling on that?
Well, I was aware of the collusion. My grandpa was still the GM of the Dodgers. Bob Boone, also, who became a mentor for me, was stuck in the middle of that, and he's talked to me about it. And he won. He got his money out, after the lawsuit. So my grandpa never told me that there was collusion, but he was also never. He was burned early on because the Dodgers had money, and he was burned by a couple of players that. I remember watching the news, and even some of the comedians would talk about, how so-and-so is still getting paid, from a bad free agency choice by the Dodgers. And so my grandpa was a little hesitant after the early 70s to sign anyone, like what we're seeing. These guys that bounce around from team to team to team to team, and they get these whopping, contracts, and then they get traded, and then the other new team absorbs that, it's kind of odd this year with some of the guys that you would just think they should have been signed months ago. And I don't know if it's, I think back in the 80s, there was a lot of what's happening now where the agents are getting very aggressive and they're drawing a line in the sand. Well, that's what's happening now. And we've heard Boris talk about there should be a strike and blah, blah, blah. But, to me, it's the same story, just, 30 years later, we're dealing with exactly the same thing where, there might be guys that are, let's say, B+ guys, not A+ guys, and they want A+ money, and the teams have said, well, I'm not going to give that guy 8 years, or I'm not going to give, and, here's our line in the sand, and so, it's unfortunate, and I, especially the two guys, from the Royals, Moustakas and what's his name? Hosmer.
Yep.
What's the guys? Yeah. I think those two guys, they've proven that they can play on the biggest stage and have had great careers thus far. So it's really surprising to me that those two guys in particular haven't landed yet, and Darvish, But there's another 10 guys too that you're like, whoa, I forgot about these guys. They're kind of, a little bit lower profile, but it is surprising. I don't know if it's an organized collusion thing. I really do believe, though, that I've heard a lot of people in the game say it's a down year for talent in the free agent market, where next year, Bryce Harper, for example, will be out there. And pretty sure someone's going to snatch him up as quick as they can, give him a gargantuan contract, et cetera. So we'll see what happens. But it does eerily mirror what was going down in the 80s,
Yeah, Tim Raines was affected by it. Jack Morris, who just got into the Hall of Fame. It's screwed. And when you think about it, Steinbrenner put down the money to get Jack Morris, and he was slapped. He was slapped by Reisendorf's hand, and I got evidence of that. Say, what the hell are you doing? You don't start signing players. None of us. We want to keep the salaries down. And it worked. It worked for 4 seasons. 85, 86, 87, 88, and it's ironic, and I put it in here because of Kirk Gibson's home run in the 88 series off of Eckersley. When that exact moment happened, because Gibson was also a fatality of free agency, no one picked him up. When that happened, at that exact moment that happened, the collusion ended, but the lawsuits weren't settled until 1990 when all these guys got $280 million. The owners were forced to pay from the arbitrators back to these guys. And you were there. You were going through USC at the time. How was your experience on the Team USA during this time?
Oh, it was great. And, one of the things is the 85 team, I was out of high school, and it was back then there was a thing called the National Sports Festival. And it was the Olympics in a non-Olympic year, but it was America's regions against each other. So being a California guy, I was on the West team, and we played against like the North team that had, John Smoltz on their team, and then the East team and a bunch of these cocky guys from your neck of the woods. I remember having lunch with them. And our dinner with a couple of guys, and they had the accent and the whole, and they were like, I'm gonna shove this ball up your. They were being kind of, what I always thought East Coast guys were like, and And then we had the South guys, and we got to know each other because we were hanging around for a couple of weeks in this thing. Well, I had a really good tournament, and then they selected about 20 of us to go on to Team USA, and we went up to Schenectady, New York, from Baton Rouge, where the festival was. So I had a wonderful summer after my senior year. I got to play baseball the whole summer at the highest levels. I had like 4 major leaguer guys just on that team. Scott Service was one of the catchers, and Ed Sprague was a third baseman at that time. John Smoltz was one of our pitchers. It was, and then I had the experience within 2 or 3 days of getting back. I was on the USC football team, so I quickly switched gears, and I was a quarterback and a kicker. But the experience on Team USA, in high school we stayed with families, and they treated us great. And I'm a musician, and I'd been playing guitar for a few years at that point. And of course, the house that I end up in, the son is in like the top band in Albany, and they rehearse in their basement. So, I mean, I was in heaven, for that 2 weeks. And then Team USA in '88, I had an All-American year at USC. I broke some records, and by the way, those records will not be touched because they changed the bats in college, and so I hit more home runs my junior year than the entire USC team did the year that they instituted this new BB Core bat, mandate. So I think I'm pretty safe. I have my name on the record for a while, but that experience, I got to reunite with like Ed Sprague and Scott Service, who ended up being my roommate, and Ben McDonald was a great funny guy. Doug Robbins, who was a Stanford player, was on the team, and anyway, there was just I could just go down the list. Tom Goodwin was our center fielder, and it was Mickey Morandini, and these guys were not just great players, but we had a ton of fun. And Robin Ventura, another guy who, how could I not root for the White Sox rather when he was their manager? There was such a fun team, but unfortunately, I got kind of stuck in a position where I had to make a decision, and the Mariners were just on me, and they really wanted me to go and start my pro career, and they were pushing me to the point where I had to make a choice, and I flat out had to ask the coaches, look, the Mariners are just grinding the hell out of me. I got to go. And then they kind of, okay, well, here's your flight and whatever. And to this day, I just wonder, what if I would have stayed? But funny thing is, when I left, the Mariners sent me to Arizona for instructional league, and I met my wife there. So, sometimes things happen for a reason. We've been married 26 years, and so, that's one of those things about baseball is, had I not gone to USC, had I gone to what Cal State Fullerton was offering me, I mean, your life totally changes, and that's why I look back with no regrets. And sure, I wish I could have had a long career like some of my friends did in the major leagues, but it just didn't work out. But man, the experience was, people would kill for the experiences that I was able to have. So I'm not complaining one bit, that I didn't have a career, although, I still wish that I did, but I also understand the good and the bad that comes with things like in life. And I look at everything was a great experience, and I learned a lot. And I value the fact that, in life we don't just have, you learn a lot. Most of the time when you're learning from a failure. You learn how to, deal with it or fix it. We don't learn a whole lot from, unbelievable success. We learn from, mistakes and errors. And so that's why I kind of look at it like, well, that was just another piece of life that, was able to give me a lot of experiences to be ready for the future,
And something, you're absolutely right. When I was studying for the bar exam, 22 years ago, they said, look, don't pat yourself on the back because you get the practice exams right. We prefer you get these wrong because you learn from your mistakes. And I carried that through life. I climbed the corporate ladder, and then I got sick because, the consequence was I had diabetes. So by 41, my career was over because for the last, 6-7 years, I've had 8 surgeries on my feet. This is the first year that I didn't have a surgery. And I said, well, I'm not going to go back and do that, and practice law and do this because it just knocked the crap out of me. So I started writing books. Now, with you went into marketing. How did baseball help you in your marketing career?
Well, that was another accident because what I really wanted to do when I went back so one of the smart things, my grandpa was very into education, and he would sort of help me like sort of as an agent for me when I was first signing, and he insisted that the Mariners did a couple of things. They wanted, first of all, he wanted me to go to big league camp in my first spring training, which I did, and I went to big league camp every year after that. And then second, he wanted to be able to finish my schooling because I was drafted as a junior in baseball. You can get drafted as a junior. So I had still a year to go in school. Actually, it was 3 semesters, and so he was able to negotiate that. So I went back to school. I had a house at that time in Tempe, Arizona, which is down the street from Arizona State. So I looked into, that my scholarship could afford a full course of classes. And when I got there, they had this thing called the Walter Cronkite School of Communications, and I'm like, wow, and I found out that they had a major for basically on air, to be an on air, personality. And so I'm like, okay, that's what I'll do. I'll be like the color commentator guy on the games that, you hear and see. So I go in there and I talk to the professor on the very first day, and we're having like a, get to know you meeting, like a, and he says, so, tell me about what you want to do. Tell me your background. Tell me what you want to do. So I tell him the whole story, and he looks at me, he's like, so let me ask you, why do you want to go back to the minor leagues and kind of start over as an announcer? Because that's what's going to happen. You're not going to just go right to the big leagues. Like, oh, I know. He goes, you know what kind of money they make, in the minors doing that? And I go, no. So he's like, well, I do. And he broke out this, this chart. And then he goes, okay, on the other hand, if you go into the marketing side of telecommunications or, marketing, on the marketing side, this is the kind, and he gave me a chart, and it had 6 figures on it. And I go, I think I'll try that. So I didn't know anything other than I would have observations on that I didn't really know that were actually, things that they would teach you. So it was very natural for me to go into marketing and advertising and promotion and come up with ideas. And I didn't know I had a creative side in me. I honestly did not. And that was another thing that, I call it, my first foray into the real world. The first comments people made, that wasn't like, oh, look, you have a great swing. Like, nobody cares about your swing when you're in the office. Oh, you have a great arm. Like, it's irrelevant, right? But what was relevant was people said, you're really creative. You come up with ideas. And I wrote in my book about kind of the day that my life changed when the big general manager of our station invited me into a meeting with all the brains in the station. And everybody was scratching their heads on what to do on this promotion. And I came up with an idea, and he actually said, Jim, you're a super creative guy. What do you think about this? And I'm like, did he just call me super creative? Like, whoa, And before I knew it, people were taking notes, and they used my idea for this promotion. And if I remember right, it was with Toys R Us, and it was like just a different way to help them, sell their product. And they loved it, and they used it. And so before I knew it, I started an ad agency because I kept having clients tell me, hey, I really like your ideas. I like what you're doing. And I've been in that world since, I guess it was 1998, So, again, very, very, very much a passion. I love it. It's like, it's not a job. I wake up and can't wait to get to work, and I can't turn off my brain sometimes when I'm trying to lay in bed. I'm already thinking about the stuff that I'm going to do the next day and create, so I'm doing video work now. I'm writing, commercials all day. I wrote 2 of them yesterday. I'm doing, I have done voiceover work if we needed it, but I'm not necessarily, that's not my thing. But it's also, I like where I'm at because it's, kind of do it yourself kind of a thing, and you figure out ways to make it work. And it's very much like baseball, in that regard. So, again, it goes back to, I was going to be a baseball player my whole life. And so I'm just so thankful that I did find something else to make money, keep my family, reasonably, I've been pretty decent. I've had good years and bad years, but overall, I've been able to keep them in having a good life and et cetera. And it's been a lot of fun. So again, another thing in life where, I got lucky. I really feel like I just got lucky from the beginning here. So.
Now, let me ask you this. Now, everyone, 30 years later still talked about your grandfather's interview with Ted Koppel. Now, I reviewed that a few days ago because it was on Baseball by Ken Burns, and I reviewed it. And you know what? I never saw any racism in there. You know what I saw your grandfather, and I said, you know what? He goofed up, and now he's nervous, and he doesn't know how to answer this question.
Right.
And that's what I saw. As an attorney, I could see right there. He said, well, they don't have the desire. I said, that's the wrong word you used, because obviously he's rattled by it, and he's trying to maintain composure. Now, my thing is, you got a backlash to it going up. What was going on here after this?
Oh, well, I happened to be at USC, a sophomore at USC at the time, and we, that became national news. I was watching TV with my friends the night after it happened, and it was the first day at practice. I had a bunch of players on my team messing with me, thinking it was a joke, and it wasn't a joke to me. I was very, heartbroken at that point. And long and the short of it, I had to kind of, deal with this, and so. We had a game against Arizona State like that weekend, and so we flew out. And the second I get on the field, the fans were just all over me. And I had some African American players on my team, including the former NFL quarterback and current, reality show star Rodney Peete. And Rodney and I talked about this recently, man. Like, he got it. They lit him up because he was on my team. And of all the things in my career that really pissed me off, it was how players, and Don Buford was my coach, and how some of the African American players and coaches on my USC team were getting abused because of something my family members said, and they all kind of came up to me individually and then collectively and said, dude, like, we know your grandpa, we know you, you're no racist, you're one of us, and because we were a team, and so they made me feel really special, and to this day, I still keep in touch. I just saw Coach Buford, 80 years old, at our USC alumni game. He went 2 for 2 at 80 years old. His first hit was off of a kid. I say a kid on was on my team who was 48. He got a hit off a 48-year-old. He was 80, and Coach Buford and I are on the USC alumni board together. We talk to each other all the time. And again, Rodney he's a celebrity in Los Angeles. He's on a radio show during the day, and then he's on a reality show on the Hallmark Channel. So he's out running busy, and he's, of course, a USC legend. But, the fallout really came, it never stopped. And so, my first day in the minors, they give you the jersey with your name on the back, and so I'm out playing in some town, and the guy reads the name on the back of my shirt and knows exactly who I'm related to, and has to let everybody in the stands know. And I was getting ragged and by fans in Puerto Rico and Mexico and other languages, and I knew what they were saying, and it was always the same thing: your family's racist, da da da. It's something that obviously, if I could go back and change that day, I certainly would. It changed my grandpa's life. It changed my life. It changed my dad's life. So all of our family members, we were kind of put into a category of racist, and, the funny thing is the guy that was the producer of that Nightline show that night, Richard Harris is his name. He has gone on a limb for the last several years. He's told me straight up that he just kind of feels guilty about how this interview, how it went, and how it ruined my grandpa's life. And he's made it a real mission, and he's written articles that have been in major newspapers and all over the internet about, the difference between what my grandpa said in terms of being considered racist versus someone like a Donald Sterling, and the comments that he made. They're totally in a different universe. But of course, the lazy journalists, when somebody says something racist, right away they go, "Oh, another Al Campanis statement has been made by so and so," and that couldn't be further from the truth. My grandpa did say some stupid stuff, no denying it. But at the end of the day, he did sign, a ton of African American players, a ton of Latin players, left-handed Jewish kid named Sandy Koufax. And all he cared about was if you could play, I want you on my team. If you can't, well, maybe that was his only bias, his only, prejudice is if you couldn't play. He really didn't care what nationality or where you were from or anything. He just wanted the best players to be on his team, and so unfortunately that's going to be the legacy for him, and that was maybe also part of the reason I wanted to write the book, was to enlighten people that, you're executing a guy who was Jackie Robinson's roommate in the 40s. You're executing a guy who was on Jackie Robinson's barnstorming team, which, according to PBS's show, The History Detectives, they've decided that that was the very first ever integrated baseball team, and that was the winter before Jackie played on the Royals, the Montreal Royals. So the long and the short of it is, it's been, that's obviously one of the toughest things that's hit our family. In my life before that April 6, 1987, I was in baseball royalty, and I didn't even need to call or get a ticket. I just would drive right through the guard gates at the stadium, wave at everybody, go downstairs in the clubhouse, put on a uniform, go out on the field. And I'm 16, and I'm just doing it, because they gave me the green light to do anything I wanted. And then all of a sudden, all of that stopped. And so, all of our worlds turned upside down. People to this day, they still call and think like I have access to tickets for Dodger games. Like, dude, those privileges went away a long time ago, so, certainly it's been a tough thing, but I think over the course of the last 30 years, there's been a real change of thinking in terms of the person that was in that interview, and that, you cannot clump him in with some of these other racist people that we definitely are seeing, out there. So that's made me feel really good. I did a show with Shep, with Dick Shap's son, Jeremy.
Yep.
And Jeremy's got a show on a radio called The Sporting Life, and so I was on that. My dad and I were also on his television show, and talking about where things are today compared to 1987. And unfortunately, though, my grandpa was slaughtered for the things he said and whatever, but baseball hasn't really changed much. We still don't see the diversity. Dusty Baker didn't get re-signed, and he was, I believe, the only African-American manager last year. No Latin managers. So the game still needs to figure out a way to, it's no different than it was in 1987, basically. But I think there's a ton of guys that want to get into that position now, and hopefully we'll see that change. I see a guy like Tom Goodwin, for example, who would be a great major league manager, but I don't know if he wants to. I think he likes being a coach, but he did manage the fall league team last year that Tebow was on here in Arizona. And, so I think there is some, aspect of him that may want to get into, to management. But anyway, that, it was certainly a tough moment. And it still bothers me to this day that, there are still some people that clump him with the real racists out there, like the Donald Sterling for the world,
Hey, what's interesting? Because baseball really hasn't changed since '87. But the thing is, the difference when your grandpa was, in baseball now is, right now we import players from different countries, especially the Dominican Republic and Panama and Latin America, now Asia. So, you didn't have as many of those players back then than you do now. But the problem is, by importing, there's also a huge decrease in minority players in the U.S. because we're not fostering, we're not cultivating inner city kids to go out and fulfill a major league dream. So we're literally importing those from other countries, and it's taken an effect on the, especially the African American community. And there's been a big uproar about that. But when you look at the stats, I mean, little leagues are down 50% in the last 10 years. Baseball,
no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, baseball is no longer the national pastime. Now you. In your spare time, you help out with these kids and stuff. Let's describe what you do now.
Yeah, well, and just to kind of touch on that, so I work in northern Arizona during the week, Monday through Friday, my marketing advertising job, and I work with a group of radio stations, and I do advertising and marketing kind of programs, and then I go back on Saturday mornings, and it takes about 5 hours to get home. Back to LA area, and then I have usually 5 or 6 hours of lessons. And then Sunday morning I have a bunch of lessons, and then I drive back. And I've helped these players, to not just fix their swings up in a mechanical way, but also the brain. But one of the things that I've been able to kind of experience is baseball has set up this thing called the RBI Academy, and it's rebuilding baseball in the inner city kind of a thing. And Kenny Landreau, former Dodger, is one of the main instructors over there. And it's in Compton. Don Buford's been affiliated with that program. And there's a number of, great former players that are helping the program. So I do see that there's an effort. But one of the things that is different about baseball, my dad and I have had actually an argument about, and I say argument, like an intellectual argument about, what if Babe Ruth was born today in Baltimore, in the same neighborhood that he was raised in, which is not, it's still rough down there in Baltimore, and, he probably wouldn't have gravitated to baseball, not to say that he wouldn't be the same sort of talent and the same, but, it's just hard to get 18 guys on a field. And first of all, you got to have the field, and that's one of the things that I, we all know that there's just, go to the suburbs and every park is a baseball field. Go to the rich suburbs and these baseball fields are just unbelievable. I trained some kids in Newport Beach and they take me to this field and I was like, dude, this is better than when I was in the minor leagues. You guys are playing on like AstroTurf fields. I mean, it's unbelievable, right? Well, you just don't see that when you go into an inner city and, land is maybe sometimes, it's industrial. It's less, suburban. It's a lot of times I call it vertical. A lot of people live in apartment complexes, and it's hard to get a bunch of guys to play baseball. Whereas, basketball, there's a hoop and a couple of guys and they can have some fun, or there's a little empty field, or they could even play touch football in the streets, play soccer in the street, So that's another issue. The kids that I train with, they are 100% baseball players. None of them play another sport. They are getting scholarships. One of my kids got a scholarship to Stanford in 9th grade. He's that good, and he'll be going there next year. He's at the famous Mater Dei High School in Santa Ana, where last year they had a second-round catcher draft pick and another draft. I mean, this is like a feeder program to major universities and the pros. You just don't see that in a lot of other areas. So, one of the reasons that these kids in California are so good is they can play year round. I have a kid that I work with who, like on Facebook, I help him with he shows me videos and I tell him this and tell him that. And, he lives in Canada and he's from Nova Scotia, and this kid was hitting in his garage on a video he sent me, and I could see his breath. And I said, dude, how cold is it up there? He's like, well, it's minus, it's below zero outside, but it's about 20 in my garage, so it's okay. And I'm thinking 20, I'm like, dude, I'm sorry, but I'm going to be cuddled up on the couch. I'm a California kid. I couldn't even think about, but, so what I see is that there's still that dedication to the game. The kids that I train, a lot of them have extra resources that some don't, but like they have an outfield coach or an infield coach or a catcher coach or a pitching coach. Plus I'm their hitting coach. Plus they have a dietitian or nutritionist. Plus they have a trainer, like a weight training coach. So they have 4 people they see on a weekly basis that are helping them to fulfill their dreams. Now, I did get, help these kids get scholarships, which saved their parents millions of dollars. And so I think the parents look at it as an investment into their kids' future. But you know what? They have the resources to do it, and the kid has the desire to do it. So those two things, when they happen, great things happen. And unfortunately, I see baseball as a thing where, if you want to play high school baseball, your cheapest bat, $150, cheapest. And that's a piece of crap, $150 bat. Most of the kids that I'm training have a $400 bat, and they can only use it for maybe 2 months, 3 months before it starts to break inside, and they have to get another one. And they also use wood bats in the summer. These wood bats now, these maple bats, are $100+ a bat, and you can break it on one swing. And these kids come in with, 3 or 4 bats and a $300 glove and, $150 spikes. And, it's just, the game is expensive. And I'm afraid that that's also one of the issues that we see why there aren't, the inner city kids aren't getting a chance. It's expensive, and there's no field, no facilities. And you need a bunch of guys that want to play. And so, baseball's trying to address that, but I'll tell you, with the competition that we see from Dominicans, and I played in Puerto Rico, every day when I would drive to the field in Puerto Rico, there was a little sandlot game going on. Every single day I could drive in and I could see several of them happening as I was making my way to the stadium. And you just don't see that in America, So that's where and I played in Japan, and I saw the same thing, where these kids it's almost like a military thing, where in Japan, these kids are, that's why they win the Little League World Series all the time, is by the time they're 12, they're killers. They're awesome. And their mechanics are perfect, and their pitching, and, the American kids, I don't care where you're from, to get to that next level, that pro level, now you got to compete with the world. And so, like you said earlier, we had maybe 15% of the guys on my team were Latin guys, maybe 20-25% were African American guys, no Asian guys at all when I played, none. I didn't have an Asian player, ever. And then the rest of us were basically, white guys or like Mexican guys, or, but they were from America, Now we're seeing a different shift. We're seeing almost, I think it's 40% of the guys are Latin guys now. And to me, that says a lot about how the development is going on in their countries, where baseball is a ticket to get out of there. And these guys are taking it very seriously. Curacao is like puny. There's like, I don't even know if there's 1 million people there, yet they got a bunch of players in the big leagues, and they've been groomed since they were, like I was, before they could remember they were going to play baseball. And so it could be tough for American kids as we get older. One thing I'll tell you is, I asked a kid the other day, I said, okay, so when you were in 4th grade, 5th grade, how many kids in your class played baseball? In your class of, say, 30 kids, and 15 of them are boys. How many of those 15 boys besides you played baseball? And the kid sat for a second. He's like, well, it's just me and my other friends. Like, all the rest of the boys, they played soccer or basketball, or they didn't play anything. Well, and I remember back in my 4th, 5th grade class, like every single boy, maybe 1 or 2 didn't, but like just about every other kid played. And so, you're just seeing a huge drop in youth baseball, except for the guys that are at the elite levels, so, it'll be interesting to see, how that plays out in 10 years. But, we still are getting great guys coming up to the ranks, the Chris Bryants of the world, and the Bryce Harpers of the world, and the Mike Trouts of the world. These young guys are becoming instant stars. I just hope it continues like that, but I'm a little worried about, what it's going to look like in 10 years in terms of the American players.
Well, it also what bothers me is that when all these labor disputes were going on, because technically we've pretty much had decent relations amongst the union and the owners since the '94 strike until now. This is really the first big rumblings that we're hearing in a very long time. Back when we were growing up, I mean, it was literally war, the 81 strike, the whole Messersmith-McNally thing, collusion in the 80s, the 90 lockout, the arbitrators, and then no one trusted each other. Then you went on to the longest strike in baseball history. I mean, I was, 24? You were 27. So,
right.
back then it was war. But I'll tell you the truth, you've been in the minors. You played in Alaska, too, I think. You were from Alaska to Puerto Rico. No, you went everywhere. But the thing is that the conditions aren't good there. The reserve clause, I still think, applies to minor league players. There's not a lot of publicity. Unions, the pay is awful. I think that if you put more into the minors and independent leagues and get the inner city youths and the rural people and start going that way, that we can probably have a future inside America and cultivate. But they just don't do that, and I don't know why. And you've been in the minors a while, so maybe you have some light to shed on that story.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, and this is I'm not going to say his name or anything, but I'll just tell you, when I first signed, I was the third pick by the Mariners that year, and our fourth pick was like an all-state Texas left-handed pitcher, right? And he had the drawl, and he wore the cowboy hat, the boots, and the whole nines, right? And he was from some little town, I don't even remember where, but anyway, he had an offer to go to the University of Texas, and he ended up signing with the Mariners, right? So now I'm catching him, right? And I'm expecting to be just unbelievably dazzled. When you're catching after the first 2 or 3 pitches, like, you can tell when someone's got stuff and when they don't, right? So anyway, he throws the first pitch, and I'm thinking, oh, he must still be warming up, so I throw it back, and then he throws another one, and I'm like, wait a minute. He throw it back. He throws another pitch, and this is fastball. And he had been bragging about it at breakfast and stuff. And I'm like, dude, if this is all he's got, like, what? And honestly, this is something, and you can ask a scout that if you see a kid hitting 600 in some rural area, he most likely doesn't have what it takes to go to the next level at as high of a level as you might think. So, for example, growing up in Orange County like I did, and having the experiences of playing on the major league field, as a kid and getting and being with my dad, I was on a team where, Dave Parker took me under his wing and would talk to me about, how to hit and how to play the outfield. And, I mean, how many 5-year-old, 6-year-olds get that, right? So anyway, I start playing and I start having success. So I make the varsity in a very competitive area of California and Orange County as a freshman. And go on and, play against guys that become, my professional baseball players, the Division I college players, but like this kid from Texas I was talking about, the Mariners didn't do their homework because this guy had never really faced a good hitter or a bunch of good hitters in a row. So his first outing, he goes out and he's like doing what he thinks is what got him this far, and honestly, he didn't have it. I mean, maybe he needed another 3 or 4 years in the college, but unfortunately for him, he lasted like maybe 2 years in the minors. They let him go, and so he did not get a college scholarship. He got a little bit of a signing bonus, which back then, was nothing. I mean, the guy who got drafted in my pick this year got $800,000 more than I got. So again, this guy was the fourth pick, so he got less than I got, right? But anyway, so this poor guy, there was a bit of, I guess what I'm saying is even when you're at the younger ages, and that's why the kids that I'm training, I really believe a lot of them have a great future, is they're playing against future Division I and future pro pitchers right now. They're facing these really tough pitchers, guys throwing in the low 90s in high school, who are going to go to the next level, and then so are they. And by playing against the best, you get better yourself. And unfortunately, that's another element of that makes baseball so challenging, is even if you do play and you play in an area that is not considered competitive, well, you're not going to get a look. And you're lucky if you can go to junior college. And I'm working with a kid who's from Boulder, Colorado. He didn't get a look out of high school. Now he's in a junior college, And I have to say, he's probably got the best swing of all the kids that I train. And he's got tons of desire. It's just, he's now finally getting to the place where he's facing decent competition. And I feel like this kid could play at the next level, but he's going to have to take the long road, because he didn't have that benefit of playing against the best like I did in those formidable, years. Put it this way, my little league team, had four or five pro players for my little league team. Okay. My high school team had 4 or 5 pro players, My USC team, 14 or 15 of the guys on my 88 team became pro players, including Brett Boone, who was an all-star, and Jeff Cirillo, who was an all-star. So, I mean, when you play against and with players that are also really good, you improve as well. It's make it or break it, And that's the other part of the game that I think many people don't realize. Bryce Harper and Chris Bryant were Little League teammates in a very competitive Las Vegas area, and those two guys helped push each other to where they are now. We all need that as players. Brett Boone pushed me. I pushed Brett Boone. He wrote about it in his book. I wrote about it in my book. And even though we had like this little competitive thing, we were friends. It was very positive pushing. It was not negative pushing, Those elements are very underrated. And again, stats don't mean crap to me when you're in high school, because if you hit, 600 in some little small town in some small state that doesn't play a lot of baseball, well, let's see how you do in Orange County, where you're lucky. The best players, guys getting drafted, are hitting, 380, 375 in high school, not 600, because there's too many good arms for that to happen, But that kid who's hitting 380 in Orange County will have experienced way more challenges that will help him later in his career versus the kid who, is facing players that can barely throw strikes. And you know what I'm saying? The competition level, that's why you're seeing guys coming out of Georgia, tons of good players coming out of Georgia, tons of good players coming out of Florida, Texas, California. And because these are hotbeds where there's a ton of competition, and even the kids who are decent in those leagues would be great in the other small areas across the country. So that's one of the things that when I'm training kids, I ask them about, who was the last pitcher that you faced, and tell me about it. And, if you can hit a guy throwing 85 to 95 in high school, well, you're doing pretty well. Because a lot of kids don't even get to see someone throwing that hard until they're at the next level. So we'll see how this all plays out. Again, the American kids that get up there. And just to give you a funny little background, they did a mock draft for this upcoming draft in June. And so they have a pitcher from the University of Florida going first. They have a pitcher from a high school pitcher out of Georgia as the number 2 pick. Number 3 pick is the son of a former teammate of mine, Brian Terang, played with me with the Mariners, and I've known Brian since Alaska. We played against each other in Alaska in college, and then he went to Loyola Marymount, so that was down in L.A., and so we got to hang out, and I got to know him, and then he became a teammate with the Mariners. Well, his son Bryce is touted to be the 3rd pick in the draft, a high school shortstop, a left-handed hitter, and Bryce has been on Team USA 3 times. Bryce has played against the best players in Southern California. He's on an Angel scout team. He plays in Anaheim Stadium once a week against college players, and he's in high school. And how is Bryce not – he is going to make it because of, his dad, was a major league player. His mom was a Division I softball player. Brian has a batting school, so Bryce is growing up hitting at a batting school, right? He's been on all the top travel ball teams. He's been on the top high school team. He's on travel ball teams. He's on scout teams. And the scouts who've seen him, they're like, okay, this kid has all of the makeup that I want. And that's why I think he'll get a $5 million paycheck coming up here in June. And to me, but how many of those guys are there? You know what I mean? So we're still going to see American kids coming up, but just not, I think that's where I was talking about earlier, the percentage. We're going to start seeing, I think, the Latin guys overtaking the American guys on the roster pretty quick here.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. And you know what? Hey, an hour goes real quick. We're going to have to get you back on the show because I didn't even scratch the surface of your book, and this is a very important book. But we got into great topics, I'll tell you that much. Like I said, I always think outside the box. But, hey, I hope you had a good time today, Jim. I had a great time with you.
I always have a great time, but thank you, Ian, for having me on it. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, so have I, and you know, son, we're going to get you back. What I'll do is I'll send you another instant message, maybe another month. We'll talk about being a catcher because you have a lot to talk about with that. I got to go through the hazing phase of USC. Because you know, there's a lot of good stories I'm not here with. You know, it's like being a catcher. What do you look for? Then you got the Boone funnel system over here. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I didn't cover here, and I got to cover. And you know something? I want to plug your book. I think it's a really good book, and we'll get into how, you know, like we spoke before the show, how the book was organized. You know, you continue to write, but never piece anything together, and now you're writing another book coming out soon, and we just need you back on the show because it's just, you know, your book is just too important not to give it more attention, which I think it does. So, you know, hey, we'll get you back. So hold on a second. Let me end the show, and then I'll talk to you for a minute after I shut down the show. Is there anything you want to say to the folks before I leave our first episode here, or you want to just wait for next time?
Yeah, just thank you again for your time, and then you know, I think people keep listening to your show, and I know you're part of Ralph's Comfortably Zoned group, and I've been on a couple of his other podcasts, and I think that, you know, he does a great job with the talent that he has, and so keep up the good work, Ian. It sounds great.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. And hang on, and let me just finish the show. Folks, I had a good time with Jimmy today. Go out, get his book. It's on Amazon. It's the number one seller on Amazon. It's still number one.
No, it was only up there for about a week, but Tim Kirchin came out with a book at the same time, and he knocked me off. So, but that's a good. If I'm going to get knocked off, it might as well be an ESPN main guy, you know. So.
Yeah, of course. But, you know, go out, get Jim Campanis Jr.'s book, Born into Baseball, Laughter and Heartbreak, at the end of the show. A lot of great stories, a lot of great insights to the minor leagues and to the major leagues. And, you know, we'll talk about Roberto Clemente and how your grandfather had to hide him back then. Man, there's so much stuff that I haven't covered. But you know what, folks, until that time, till Jimmy comes back to the show, go out, get the book. You'll be ready for more stories. As always, I'm Ian Kahanowitz. On behalf of the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, thank you to Jim Campanis Jr. for being on the show. And in the immortal words of Everett R. Murrow, good night, folks. Good luck. We'll see you next time.